So I wanted to do a video talking through the sword court cards. They're some of my favourite court cards, partly because I think they're so well defined, and partly because in a tarot reading they're so helpful. So if you're going to look at the court cards, personally, I think it's always best to start with the queens. The queens are the highest concentration of the suit in the court cards, so they're very often the easiest to understand. The reason that I love Rider-Waite is because I think the images are so clear. My other favourite deck for images for the court cards is going to be the Druidcraft deck, where I think that the cards are much more personified as real people. But let's start with the Queen of Swords and let's look at the images in this card. So when you're looking at the court cards, the first thing you want to do is to look at the relationship between the person in the card and the suit. And here we have the Queen of Swords, and she is holding the sword, and it is in front of her, and it is upright. Very, very clearly upright. If you go through the tarot deck, there aren't actually many upright swords. We have the upright sword in Justice, but in principle, there aren't that many. They're usually to the side. And here we have the beautiful sword right upright. Very similar in images to the Ace of Swords. The Queen of Swords has only one thing to say, looking at the one bird up there, and it's what she perceives as the truth. Her truth. That's it. One opinion, her truth. It is not negotiable. It's not up for discussion. If we look at her, she's not looking at you. She's looking out. She's not looking at you, the reader. She is looking out across the vista because she doesn't really care what you think about her truth. It's her truth. She owns it. You've asked for it, hopefully, and she's going to share it with you. So the Queen of Swords as a friend is going to be very honest, perhaps even blunt. If you've had your hair cut and you're looking for someone to bolster your ego, don't go to your Queen of Swords friends, because if she doesn't like your hair, she's going to tell you. On the other hand, if you want somebody to give you a dose of reality, a reality check, if you want to know what somebody really thinks about what's going on in your life, go to your Queen of Swords friend, because she'll be honest. If you're getting the Queen of Swords in a reading, it may well be, and you've got to decide for yourself whether it's sort of a warning or a blessing. It may be that A, you need to be more honest. Very often for clients with this upright sword and with the Queen looking away from the reader, the Queen of Swords is about boundaries. It's about being able to say, I can't do that today, rather than, of course I will. So you may be being asked to be more honest, to have better boundaries with the people in your life, or you may be being asked to soften your opinions, to soften of your views, and start to take consideration of the other people in your life. I think if you're reading for yourself, you will know. If you're reading for someone else, you'd need to look at the cards either side and really consider your question. But the Queen of Swords, one truth, it's her truth, and that's the end of the discussion. If we now move on to the King of Swords, we can see the difference. The King of Swords is looking at you. Yes, his sword is there in his hand, ready to go, but it's to one side. And we have two birds now. It's important to note that both with the Queen and the King, we can see the end of the sword. So the King of Swords, he's still going to be honest. He's still going to be truthful. He's still going to tell you, if he's someone else, what you need to know. But he's going to consider the other side of the story. He's going to listen. That's what sometimes the Queen of Swords is less good at listening. The King of Swords is going to engage with you as he tells you his truth, and he's going to listen to what you have to say and integrate it into what he's thinking. So perhaps if you are running, let's say you've got a job, let's say this is your boss, you're running late, you come to the Queen of Swords, she doesn't want to know why you're late. To be honest, there may be sometimes some jobs where that's the right approach. you know? The King of Swords, on the other hand, he's going to listen to your reason and he's going to consider his truth and your truth to find the balance. And seeing the end of the sword in both of these cards, to me, that represents considering the consequences of what they're saying. So when we can see the whole sword, this is somebody who has considered the consequences of what they are saying. The Queen has considered the consequences of telling you her truth. She's just decided it is her truth, so it's worth telling. Whereas with the King of Swords, we have more of a conversation, a communication, the ability to compromise. Moving on to the Knight of Swords, and now we can't see the end of the sword. And we have multiple birds in the sky with the idea that we can't quite see this bird here. And to me, that suggests there might be more birds there that we can't see when we can see a part of a bird. So when we're reading with knights, to me, there are two things you look at. First of all, you look at the horse. Horse says everything you need to know. To me, the horse represents the physical body and the knight represents whatever element is being expressed in this suit, which in this case, to me, the suit of swords is our words and our logical mind. This is when your mind is ruling your body and it may be leading to exhaustion and burnout. This is when you've got something to say and you're saying it even though it's agitating you. It's making you exhausted, it's making you angry, it's draining you. Maybe that you've got something to say and you're not listening to the other person. You don't care what they say. You have to get your truth out. Very often, in fact, the Knight of Swords is somebody with a plan, a goal, something they want to achieve, something they've set in their mind that needs to be achieved, and they are pushing through it to the point of exhaustion. They are not taking on board other people's opinions, and they have not considered the consequences of what they're doing. It's the kind of person that, I mean, it's a very random example, but if your plan or your objective was to decorate your lounge today, you haven't thought about the fact that you've got guests coming round tomorrow and that there's no way the furniture can be in the next day. So you're probably going to end up working through the night trying to achieve the unachievable goal. If you get the Knight of Swords, it doesn't mean to say your goal is unachievable, but it might suggest that you haven't thought it through properly. We can't see the end of the swords. So it's lots to say, lots of energy, but there is an element there of confusion with the multiple birds and not having thought it through properly, where we can't see the end of the swords. I mean, on the other hand, if the Queen of Swords has got something to achieve, by God, she's going to achieve it. When she said she's going to do something, she's going to do it. King of Swords, much more likely to delegate, cooperate, but he's still going to do it. The Knight of Swords probably will achieve his goal. It's just that he's going to be in bed for a week afterwards because he's exhausted himself so much. And then finishing with the pages, I think the pages are the hardest of the court cards to understand because they are the least defined. And so really my advice is to look at the relationship between the person and whatever represents the suit, and then to look at the landscape behind them. So now again, we have this concept that we can't see the end of the sword. This is about not having thought something through properly. It's about not having taken the time to think about the consequences of the consequences of the consequences. He is not looking, she is not looking at the sword. So this is somebody that is going to speak without really thinking it through. This is somebody who's going to act without really having their full mind on whatever they're doing. We've got all the birds in the sky. There is a scattered energy to the Page of Swords. Often with the Page of Swords, they can change their opinion. They can change their plan. They're going to try and ride out the changes and see where it goes. There is a wildness to this. We do have the Blue Mountains in the background. The Blue Mountains in the Rider-Waite deck are going to represent the highest potential. So there's genuine potential there, but perhaps not enough grounding, not enough thinking through, not enough planning. And if we think about, how we might create a plan, we often go through all of the different stages of the court cards. We often start with multiple ideas, chopping, changing, trying things out, thinking things through. We often then form one plan, one goal, but we don't quite believe we can get there. As it begins to take shape, as we begin to see with the full sword that we can do it, we often we can become quite dogmatic. I'm doing it my way, don't really care about anything else. And then when we reach a sense of it's really working for us, we're perhaps more ready to discuss, to delegate, to cooperate. So I hope that has been helpful. I hope to do some more videos coming up on all the different court cards. I love the court cards. The court cards were the first cards that I taught, and they remain my favourite. If you'd like to work with me, I do teach one-to-one, but I also teach a lot on Zoom. And in fact, each month I try and do a tarot Q&A where it's you can join up. There's a link on my webpage, and you can email me questions beforehand, or you can join live and ask me the questions, and I just try and answer anything on tarot, really. Often people are interested in specific cards, specific spreads, what it's like being a tarot pro, how I started reading tarot. Often people are interested in particular card combinations they may have had. It's a really nice space to just be able to chat tarot, and ask anything you want.